Don't tell Jake I hired you. Those were the first words Daniel Hayes said after offering me the job, which was unfortunate, because nothing makes a completely innocent summer project sound more suspicious than a 46-year-old man lowering his voice and asking you to keep something from his son. His son, for the record, was my best friend. I'm sorry, I said. Could you repeat that in a way that sounds less like the beginning of a felony? Daniel looked at me across the dining table. No smile. Just those calm gray eyes that had been making me forget basic vocabulary since I was 19. Jake thinks I'm still interviewing people. You are. I was. He closed the portfolio sitting between us. My portfolio. 43 pages of architecture school projects, restoration concepts, and several drawings I had spent the previous night convincing myself were embarrassments to the profession. When can you start? I stared at him. This was not how today was supposed to go. I had driven 2 hours to the Hayes family lake house expecting an interview, maybe a polite rejection, and definitely enough awkwardness to sustain me through September. Instead, Daniel Hayes had apparently decided to skip directly to destroying my nervous system. You're hiring me? That's generally what "when can you start" means. Right. Excellent. Strong start, Evan. Very employable. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He wore a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms because apparently workplace safety regulations did not cover unnecessarily attractive employers. I looked at the portfolio. Safer. Jake said you had 3 candidates. I did. And you were the best one. My brain stopped. Not because nobody had complimented my work before. Professors had. Classmates had. My mother once called a model I built very building-like. But Daniel said it without hesitation. No encouragement for the young person voice. No favor to my son's friend's softness. Just certainty. Oh, Daniel's eyebrow lifted. That's all. I had a better response prepared for rejection. That finally got me something. A small curve at the corner of his mouth. Dangerous. You'll be documenting the original structure, updating drawings, sourcing materials, and helping me with the restoration plan. 8 weeks. 8 weeks. 56 days. Potentially 400 hours standing near my best friend's father while pretending I had never noticed his hands. Perfect. And Jake can't know because... Daniel's expression shifted. Barely. Because he'll think I hired you as a favor. Did you? His eyes returned to mine. No, one word. Immediate. I hired you because your work is good. Something warm and deeply inconvenient moved through my chest. Daniel stood. Come on. I'll show you the house. The lake house was bigger than it looked from outside. Old cedar siding, wide windows, exposed beams, sunlight spilling across dusty floors. Beautiful in the way abandoned things sometimes were. Not ruined. Waiting. Daniel walked me through the first floor, explaining what could be saved and what needed replacing. The moment he started talking about the house, he changed. More animated. His hands moved when he explained the original joinery. His voice warmed when he pointed out century-old wood beneath cheap paneling. I stopped noticing that he was Jake's dad for almost 3 full minutes. Then he rolled his sleeves higher. My professionalism died quietly. Upstairs, we reached the end of the hallway. 4 doors. 3 open. 1 closed. Painted blue. Daniel walked past it. I didn't. What's in there? He stopped. The warmth disappeared from his face. Not part of the project. Structural issue? No, storage. Evan. Calm. Not angry. Final. Leave that room alone. I raised both hands. Blue door. Forbidden. Understood. His gaze stayed on the door for 1 second too long. Then he headed downstairs. I followed, curiosity already chewing through my common sense. Outside, late afternoon sunlight turned the lake gold. Daniel handed me a spare key. Monday. 7:30. Morning. That's usually what 7:30 means. This working relationship is already hostile. That almost smile appeared again. I took the key. Our fingers brushed. Barely. Completely accidental. My entire nervous system reacted like someone had thrown a toaster into a bathtub. Daniel didn't move immediately. Neither did I. Then he released the key. 8 weeks, Evan. I looked back at the old house, at the blue room visible through an upstairs window, then at the man who had hired me before I'd even realized the interview was over. 8 weeks working beside Daniel Hayes. 8 weeks keeping it from Jake. 8 weeks with 1 room I wasn't allowed to enter and 1 man I absolutely was not allowed to want. What could possibly go wrong? I muttered. Daniel heard me. Plenty. And somehow, The way he said it made me think he already knew. By the end of week 1, I had learned 3 important things about working for Daniel Hayes. First, he believed 7:30 meant 7:25. Second, he drank coffee like it was a structural requirement. Third, 8 weeks was going to be a very long time if he kept standing behind me like that. You're off by half an inch. His voice came from directly over my shoulder. I stared at the measuring tape stretched across the window frame. I'm not. Daniel leaned closer. His chest nearly touched my back. You are. I'm choosing to interpret this as artistic freedom. It's a window, Evan. Architecture is art. Not when the replacement glass doesn't fit. Annoyingly compelling argument. I checked again. Half an inch. I hate this job. It's Monday. Exactly. Daniel reached past me and adjusted the tape. His forearm brushed mine. My brain immediately abandoned architecture and began pursuing several unrelated research interests. I stepped away. Coffee. You've had 2. I'm 24. My organs still believe in me. That earned the small smile I was becoming dangerously motivated to collect. By week 2, we had developed a routine. I arrived at 7:25 because I refused to let Daniel win. He already had coffee waiting. Mine had cream and 1 sugar. I had never told him how I took it. I chose not to investigate what that did to me emotionally. Mornings were measurements and documentation. Afternoons were demolition, material samples, or drives into town for supplies. Lunch happened on the back porch overlooking the lake, usually with Daniel reading contractor emails while I pretended not to watch sunlight catch the silver beginning at his temples. Very professional. Extremely normal. The house changed around us slowly. Old paneling came down. Original wood appeared beneath layers of paint. Windows opened that had been stuck for years. Every day revealed something worth saving. Except the blue room. The door stayed closed. Always. I passed it 6, 10, 20 times a day. Never open. Never discussed. Once, I noticed Daniel standing in front of it when he thought I was downstairs. He didn't touch the handle. He just looked at the door. Then he walked away. Naturally, this improved my curiosity tremendously. What do you think is in there? I asked Jake that night over the phone. Where? I immediately regretted speaking. Daniel still hadn't told Jake he'd hired me. Apparently, our ridiculous secret had survived 14 days. Nothing. Hypothetical room. Are you high? Not currently. You're weird in summer. Thank you. By week 3, the project had expanded into every corner of my life. I had sawdust in my car, paint on 3 shirts, and photographs of 19th century hinges occupying more storage on my phone than pictures of actual humans. Daniel was responsible for at least 2 of those problems. Possibly all 3. We spent Wednesday afternoon choosing wood samples at a salvage yard. Daniel rejected 6 options before handing me one. This. I examined it. White oak. Reclaimed. Expensive. Worth it. I ran my thumb over the grain. You really hate replacing things, don't you? The joke left my mouth casually. Daniel went quiet. I looked up. Something unreadable had crossed his face. If something can be saved, he said, I'd rather save it. Then he walked toward the register. I stood there holding the wood sample, suddenly feeling like we had stopped talking about flooring. That evening, we worked later than usual. Golden light poured through the unfinished windows while cicadas screamed outside. I was sketching built-in shelving at the dining table when Daniel placed a sandwich beside my elbow. Eat. Romantic. He paused. My pencil stopped. Why had I said that? Why was my mouth allowed independence? Then Daniel calmly set a bottle of water beside it. Don't get excited. I bought one for myself too. Cruel. Eat your sandwich. I smiled despite myself. He walked away. At the stairs, Daniel rolled his sleeves above his elbows. Again, I looked down at my sketch immediately. 8 weeks. That was all this was. A summer job. A portfolio project. 56 days with a clear ending. But somewhere between the coffee he remembered, the lunches on the porch, and the blue door neither of us talked about, the countdown had started feeling less like a deadline. It felt like a warning, because week 3 was almost over, and I was already beginning to wish summer would slow down. The worst thing I ever said about Daniel Hayes was broadcast through a Bluetooth speaker at approximately 70% volume. Your dad needs to stop rolling up his sleeves. This is becoming a workplace safety issue. My own voice echoed through the lake house. Loud, clear, horrifyingly well enunciated. I stopped breathing. Somewhere downstairs, a power drill went silent. Oh no. No. No, no. I stared at my phone. The voice memo app was recording. More importantly, the little blue Bluetooth icon was glowing in the corner of the screen. Connected to Daniel's speaker. Downstairs, where Daniel was. I considered several reasonable options. Jumping into the lake. Changing my name. Leaving the country. Faking my death felt dramatic, but I was willing to workshop it. Then footsteps sounded on the stairs. Slow. Unhurried. Of course. Even approaching my execution, Daniel refused to rush. He appeared in the doorway wearing jeans, work boots, and the dark green shirt responsible for the current collapse of my dignity. His sleeves were rolled just below his elbows. I looked at his face. Daniel looked at me. Silence. So, he said, I wanted the floorboards to open. Before you say anything, Daniel glanced down at his arms. Workplace safety issue. Technology has betrayed me. Technology? I take full responsibility for trusting it. His mouth twitched. This was worse than anger. Who were you sending that to? Nobody. Daniel waited. Jake. His eyebrows rose. My son. Unfortunately, you were sending my son a voice memo about my arms. When he said it like that, it sounded unreasonable. There was context. I'm fascinated by the context. You shouldn't be. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. Completely comfortable. I hated him. More accurately, I hated the part of myself that noticed the movement pulled his shirt tighter across his shoulders. Evan. Yes. Look at me. I'd rather not. Why? Recent events. He laughed. Actually laughed. Low, warm, completely unfair. You think this is funny? A little. I'm experiencing a medical emergency. You seem fine. Internally, I'm being airlifted. Daniel shook his head. Then, while maintaining direct eye contact, he reached for one rolled sleeve and folded it higher. Once. My brain blue-screened. He did the other one. Better, he asked. This man was evil. You're my employer. I'm aware. There are laws. Against sleeves? There should be. Daniel smiled. Fully this time. I had seen him smile before, but never like that. Open. Amused. Younger somehow. It did something catastrophic to my chest. Then his expression softened. You don't need to be embarrassed. That was precisely the wrong thing to say. I wasn't embarrassed until you said embarrassed. Evan, can we pretend this never happened? Probably not. Can I quit? No. Can you fire me? Also no. Hostile workplace. Finish the upstairs measurements. He pushed away from the doorframe. And disconnect your phone from the speaker. I covered my face. Please leave. His footsteps moved toward the stairs. I waited until they stopped. Evan. I reluctantly lowered my hands. Daniel stood at the top step. His eyes dropped briefly to my phone, then returned to mine. For what it's worth. No, absolutely not. Daniel. He rolled one sleeve another fraction higher. I'll try to be more careful. Then he went downstairs. I stood motionless for a full 10 seconds. I hate summer, I whispered. From downstairs, Daniel called. Speakers still connected. I nearly threw my phone through the window. The rest of week 4 should have been normal. It was not. Every accidental touch now had context. Every time Daniel stood beside me, I remembered that he knew. When he passed me a pencil and our fingers brushed, I pulled away too quickly. When he leaned over my shoulder to check a drawing, I forgot what scale meant. Daniel noticed everything. He just didn't embarrass me further. Somehow that was worse. Friday evening, I found 2 cold drinks waiting on the porch after work. Daniel sat on the railing, looking across the lake. I took the second bottle. Peace offering? Hydration. Less romantic. His gaze shifted toward me. Just for a second. Maybe. My heartbeat stumbled. Daniel looked back at the water before I could decide whether I had imagined it. Above us, the upstairs window of the blue room reflected the setting sun. For weeks left. Half the summer gone. And for the first time, I wasn't worried Daniel knew I was attracted to him. I was worried he might be attracted to me too. The storm arrived at 6:17 on a Thursday evening, which was inconvenient because Daniel and I had just spent 20 minutes pretending there was nothing strange about him saying, maybe, on the porch 3 days earlier. That looks bad, I said. Through the unfinished windows, the sky over the lake had turned almost black. Daniel checked his phone. Severe thunderstorm warning. Excellent. I've always wanted to die inside a historically accurate renovation. The house has survived 100 years. I'm 24. I haven't developed that kind of confidence yet. Thunder cracked across the lake. The lights went out. I stared at Daniel. You were saying? 10 minutes later, Rain was hitting the windows sideways. The road back toward town was under a flash flood advisory, and Daniel had made the executive decision that neither of us was driving anywhere, which was sensible, mature, responsible. It also meant I was spending the night alone in a lake house with my best friend's father. I briefly considered swimming home. Daniel found 2 lanterns and set one on the kitchen counter. There's a guest room upstairs. Absolutely not. He looked at me. Why? My eyes involuntarily flicked toward the hallway, toward the blue door. Your upstairs has secrets. The guest room doesn't. That's exactly what a haunted house owner would say. Daniel laughed under his breath. Take the couch, then. So I did, or planned to. Sleeping became a future problem when Daniel found an old French press and somehow produced coffee without electricity. We ended up sitting on the living room floor beside the open porch doors, listening to rain hammer the roof. The lantern between us painted warm shadows across Daniel's face. Without work lights, power tools, measurements, and schedules, the house felt different. So did he. Why this place? I asked. Daniel looked toward the dark lake. What do you mean? You could have sold it. His fingers tightened slightly around his mug. Jake said you haven't used it much in years. Daniel glanced at me. Jake told you that. Jake tells me everything except useful information. Silence settled between us. I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, we used to spend every summer here. You and Jake. All 3 of us. I understood immediately. His ex-wife. Daniel stared into his coffee. After the divorce, Jake stopped wanting to come. I didn't blame him. Too many memories. His mouth tightened. So I closed the place up. Thunder rolled somewhere farther away. For how long? 7 years. I looked around. 7 years of dust. Closed windows. Covered furniture. A blue door nobody opened. Why restore it now? Daniel took his time answering. I got tired of owning something I couldn't look at. The joke I had been preparing disappeared. I thought if I repaired it, he shrugged. Maybe it could become something else. And has it? His gaze moved around the room, across exposed beams and newly restored windows, before settling on me. More than I expected. My pulse misbehaved. I looked at my mug. Careful. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was worse. Much worse. Daniel leaned back against the couch. You're good at this, Evan. You already hired me. You can stop recruiting. I mean it. His voice softened. You see what something could become without pretending the damage isn't there. The room went very still. I looked at him. Daniel wasn't looking at the house anymore. Neither was I. We're still talking about restoration, right? I asked. A small smile touched his mouth, but there was sadness underneath it. Probably safer if we are. There it was again. That invisible thing between us. Attraction acknowledged without being named. A line neither of us had crossed, but both of us could suddenly see. Lightning flashed outside. I glanced toward the stairs. Is that why the blue room stays closed? Daniel's expression changed immediately. Not anger. Pain. Quiet and old. Not tonight. I nodded. No joke. Okay. His eyes stayed on mine for a moment. Thank you. We sat there until the coffee went cold. Eventually Daniel gave me a blanket and disappeared upstairs. I stretched out on the couch, listening to the storm weaken over the lake. Sleep refused to cooperate. Not because of thunder, because one sentence kept replaying in my head. You see what something could become without pretending the damage isn't there. I had spent 4 weeks thinking Daniel hired me to help restore a house. Lying there in the dark, I started wondering whether that was ever really the project. And upstairs, somewhere beyond the hallway, the blue room remained closed. The almost kiss happened because I nearly fell into the lake, which felt appropriate considering my romantic life had never displayed much dignity. The morning after the storm, the world looked offensively beautiful. Blue sky, bright water, sunlight sparkling across the dock like nature hadn't spent the previous night trying to kill us. Daniel was inspecting storm damage near the boathouse while I documented warped boards. That one's loose, he said. I see it. Then don't step on it. Thank you, Dad. Silence. I closed my eyes. That sounded different in my head. Daniel's mouth twitched. I hope so. Can we erase the last 5 seconds? No, you're very committed to preserving my suffering. Restoration philosophy. I turned to glare at him and stepped backward, onto the loose board. Naturally, my foot slipped. The clipboard flew from my hand. I had exactly enough time to think, this is going to be embarrassing, before Daniel caught me. One arm locked around my waist. The other grabbed my forearm. My back hit his chest instead of the lake. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then Daniel turned me toward him. You okay? Yep. Brilliant. His hand was still around my waist. Evan. Very okay. You almost fell. But I didn't. Because I caught you. I noticed. His fingers tightened slightly against my side. My brain noticed that too. Enthusiastically. We were standing too close. Not accidentally close anymore. Close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. Close enough to feel his breath. Daniel's gaze dropped to my mouth. Oh, every joke disappeared. My hand had somehow ended up against his chest. His heart was beating faster than I expected. That changed everything. Daniel Hayes was nervous. Because of me. He leaned in. Barely. I did too. There was maybe an inch between us when his eyes closed. Then he stopped. No, the word was quiet. It still felt like being dropped. Daniel released me and stepped back. Cold air rushed into the space where his body had been. Right, I said. Obviously. Evan, no, it's fine. I've been to retrieve my clipboard. Workplace safety issue resolved. Look at me. Big fan of the doc, actually. Evan. I straightened. Daniel looked frustrated, but not with me. I said no because I'm the one signing your checks. I blinked. What? You work for me. I'm aware. Which means if anything happens between us while that's true, you can't ever be completely certain whether saying no would affect your job. My embarrassment stalled. Daniel, I know you wouldn't, you know that. I know that. His jaw tightened. It still matters. I stared at him. Somewhere nearby, water tapped softly against the dock. So, dangerous question. Necessary question. If I didn't work for you? Daniel looked at me for a long time. That's different. My pulse kicked. How different? Evan. I'm gathering data. You're pushing. Occupational hazard. Daniel exhaled, almost laughing. Then his expression became serious again. There's something else. Of course there was. Jake. My stomach dropped. Right. My best friend. His son. The person whose father I had nearly kissed before breakfast. He deserves to hear about this from me before there's anything to hear about from someone else. You want to tell him? Daniel's eyes held mine. If we decide there's something worth telling. That single word did unreasonable things to me. And until then, until the project ends, I'm your employer. Professional. Exactly. No flirting. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're the one sending voice memos about my arms. One technological accident, and suddenly I have a reputation. He smiled. I hated how relieved that made me feel. Daniel stepped past me toward the house, then stopped. And Evan? Yeah. He looked back. For clarity, I stopped because of the job. My throat went dry. Not because I didn't want to kiss you. Then he walked away. I remained on the dock staring at the lake like it had personally betrayed me. For weeks ago, wanting Daniel had been humiliating but manageable because it belonged entirely to me. Now I knew he wanted me too. And somehow that was worse. Because the project still had 3 weeks left. 3 weeks of shared coffee. 3 weeks of measuring rooms shoulder to shoulder. 3 weeks of Daniel rolling up his sleeves like a man with no respect for human life. And one very clear rule between us. Nothing happens until the project ends. I looked toward the lake house. Upstairs, sunlight caught the window of the blue room. Closed. Waiting. Apparently Daniel and I had more in common with that room than I wanted to admit. The blue room opened on a Tuesday, and for once, it wasn't because I ignored Daniel. I was carrying 2 boxes of reclaimed brass hardware upstairs when I heard something hit the floor at the end of the hallway. The blue door stood open 3 inches. I stopped. This was a test. The universe had finally grown tired of subtlety and decided to measure my moral character using a forbidden room and terrible impulse control. Daniel. No answer. I set the boxes down. Daniel. Still nothing. I approached the door. Slowly. Respectfully. Like a professional adult who absolutely wasn't trying to see through the gap. Then I noticed the broken wooden doorstop on the floor. The door must have shifted while Daniel was working downstairs. Completely accidental. Not my fault. Legally, probably. I reached for the handle to close it. Then I saw the wall. Pencil marks climbed the blue-painted door frame. Jake, 5. Jake, 7. Jake, 10. Beside them were dates, crooked lines, tiny notes and handwriting I recognized as Daniel's. Finally taller than the kitchen counter. Lost first tooth. Claims shoes make him faster. I forgot about closing the door. Inside was a child's bedroom preserved beneath years of dust. Faded glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling. Baseball trophies lined one shelf. A glove rested on the desk beside a photograph of a much younger Daniel holding a grinning little boy on his shoulders. Nothing frightening. Nothing scandalous. Somehow, that made it hurt more. Evan. I turned. Daniel stood behind me. His face had gone completely still. I didn't open it. I know. No anger. That was worse. The doorstop broke. I was going to close it. Daniel looked past me into the room. You can stop explaining. I stepped aside. I'm sorry. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then Daniel walked inside. I had never seen him cross that threshold. He ran his fingers over one of the height marks. Jake, 12. He hated this room by the end, Daniel said. I stayed near the doorway. Why? Because after the divorce, it stopped being his summer bedroom and became proof that his parents weren't coming back here together. Daniel gave a humorless smile. Kids understand symbolism better than adults give them credit for. And you left it like this. 7 years. His eyes moved over the trophies, stars, photographs. Every time I thought about changing it, it felt like erasing something. So you locked it. Apparently I'm very good at that. The words landed quietly. I looked at him. This wasn't the Daniel who corrected measurements or negotiated with contractors. This was a man standing inside the remains of a life he had once expected to keep. You don't have to erase it. Daniel glanced at me. I stepped toward the doorframe and touched one of Jake's height marks. Keep these. And do what with the rest? I looked toward the wide window facing the lake. Morning light filled the dusty room. Make it useful again. For what? Workspace. Reading room. Somewhere Jake can use when he visits. Somewhere you can use when he doesn't. Daniel's expression tightened. You make it sound easy. It's not. I met his eyes. Restoration isn't pretending something never changed. Silence. It's deciding the change doesn't make it worthless. Daniel stared at me. Too long. Too openly. I became painfully aware that we were alone in a room full of his past, 3 weeks after he almost kissed me. You do that a lot, he said. Do what? Say something about the house when you're clearly talking about people. Occupational hazard. He smiled faintly. Then his gaze dropped to my mouth. My heartbeat immediately became unprofessional. But Daniel didn't move closer. Neither did I. The rule was still there. Maybe that was why the moment felt more intimate than the dock. What would you keep? He asked. I looked around. The height marks. The stars. That ridiculous glove. Jake loved that glove. It looks like roadkill. I paid $40 for it. You were robbed. Daniel laughed softly. The heaviness in the room loosened. I pointed toward the window. New desk there. Built-in shelves along this wall. Keep the blue if you want. Daniel considered it. Jake always hated the blue. Then definitely keep it. Parents need revenge. Another laugh. Then he looked around again. This time differently. Not like someone visiting a grave. Like an architect. Draw something up, he said. I blinked. You're adding it to the project? Daniel nodded. If you want it. I did. More than I should have. Because suddenly the blue room wasn't forbidden anymore. It was unfinished. There was a difference. I picked up the broken doorstop. Daniel stayed beside the old height marks. Evan. Yeah. His voice softened. Thank you for not trying to erase it. I looked at him, at the room, at 7 years of dust glowing in summer sunlight. You don't have to destroy the past to make room for what comes next. Daniel's eyes held mine. And in that moment, I knew we were no longer talking about the room at all. Jake arrived 2 days early and caught his father touching my face. To be fair, Daniel was removing a streak of blue paint from my cheek. To be less fair, he was doing it with his thumb, very slowly, while we stood approximately 6 inches apart inside Jake's childhood bedroom. There are moments when the universe gives you a warning. This was not one of them. Well, Jake said from the doorway. Daniel's hand dropped. I nearly swallowed my tongue. Jake. My best friend looked at me. Then Daniel. Then the blue paint on Daniel's thumb. Should I leave and come back with emotional preparation? It's not what it looks like, I said. Daniel glanced at me. That sentence has never helped anyone. Thank you, Daniel. Jake's eyes narrowed. Daniel. Right. I had called his father Daniel for 8 weeks. Jake apparently found this more disturbing than the face touching. What are you doing here? Daniel asked. Nice to see you too, Dad. Jake dropped his duffel bag. My trip got canceled. Thought I'd surprise you. He looked around the room. His expression changed. You opened it. Daniel went quiet. Jake stepped inside. His fingers brushed the old height marks on the doorframe. For several seconds, nobody mentioned my ongoing death. You kept these, Jake said. Evan's idea. Jake looked at me. The new desk sat beneath the lake-facing window. Shelves lined one wall, but the faded stars remained overhead. Old and new occupying the same room, without either pretending the other didn't exist. It looks good, Jake said quietly. Thanks. Then his eyes moved between us again. Unfortunately, my best friend was not stupid. Evan, walk with me. Fantastic. We ended up on the dock 5 minutes later. Jake shoved his hands into his pockets. How long? How long what? Don't insult me. I stared at the lake. Nothing happened. That wasn't my question. Damn him. A few weeks. Jake exhaled. You like my dad? This conversation is physically painful. Evan. Yes. There. Released into the universe. I like your dad. Jake looked toward the house. Does he like you? I hesitated. That was enough. Jesus. Again, nothing happened. You're working for him. I know. He's 22 years older than you. I also know subtraction. Jake shot me a look. I'm not trying to be an asshole. You're naturally gifted. He ignored that. I'm asking whether you've thought about this outside the lake house bubble. I frowned. What does that mean? You've been here every day for 2 months. Just you two. Working together. Eating together. Getting trapped in storms. Apparently renovating my childhood trauma together. That last one wasn't on the contract. Jake's expression stayed serious. What happens when summer ends? The question landed harder than I expected. What? You go home. Dad goes back to his normal life. No project. No reason to see each other every day. He paused. Is this real, or did 8 weeks of forced proximity make it feel real? I wanted to dismiss him. Make a joke. Tell him he was being dramatic. But I couldn't, because I had counted the weeks. I had wished summer would slow down. And every meaningful moment between Daniel and me had happened inside this house. He almost kissed me, I admitted. Jake closed his eyes. I did not need that information. He stopped. Jake looked at me. Because I work for him. He said nothing happens until the project ends. Something in Jake's face softened. That sounds like Dad. He also said you deserve to hear about it before anything happened. Jake stared toward the house again. That also sounds like Dad. Are you angry? I don't know yet. Fair. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not going to tell you who you can date. You're 24, not 14. Comforting. But you're my best friend. He's my dad. If this goes badly, I don't get to walk away from either of you. That silenced me. So figure out whether it's real before you turn everybody's life into Thanksgiving from hell. Later, Daniel found me packing my laptop earlier than usual. Jake talked to you. Interrogated. There may be a tribunal. Daniel almost smiled. Is he upset? Confused. And you? I looked at him. That was the problem. I knew exactly what I felt when Daniel was standing in front of me. I didn't know what remained when he wasn't. I think I need some space. Daniel's face went still. Okay. Just that. No persuasion. No reaching for me. Somehow, I wanted both. The project ends Friday, I said. I know. Maybe until then we should just finish the work. A pause. If that's what you need. I nodded. Daniel did too. Professional. Respectful. Miserable. I drove away without looking back until I reached the end of the road. Then I checked the mirror. Daniel was still standing on the porch. 5 days left. For weeks, I had been terrified summer would end before anything could begin. Now I was beginning to wonder whether it needed to end before I could know if anything between us was real. The last day of the project began exactly the way the first one had. Daniel handed me coffee and pretended it meant nothing. 1 sugar, I said, staring at the cup. You've been making it for 8 weeks. I think I can stop acting surprised. That would be progress. Don't get emotional. We still have the final walkthrough. Daniel smiled faintly. Professional. We had become painfully good at professional. For 5 days, there had been no accidental touches. No lunches lingering past 30 minutes. No comments about sleeves. Daniel never pushed after I asked for space, which was mature, respectful, and deeply irritating. By 10, the contractor had finished the punch list. By noon, I had photographed every restored room. At 2, Daniel and I stood inside the blue room for the final review. It barely resembled the place I had first seen through a forbidden doorway. The old blue walls remained, cleaned and repaired rather than covered. Jake's height marks still climbed the door frame. The ridiculous baseball glove sat on a new shelf. Beneath the lake-facing window was a wide oak desk, sunlight stretching across its surface. Past and future. Same room. No apology required. Daniel ran his hand over the desk. You were right. Please repeat that. I want to record it. Don't. We know what happens when you record things. I pointed at him. Low blow. His smile disappeared slowly as he looked around. I mean it, Evan. You were right about this room. Something tightened in my chest. It just needed permission to become something else. Daniel looked at me. Maybe. Neither of us said what we were actually talking about. At 4:30, I submitted the final project files. Daniel reviewed the invoice, signed the completion paperwork, and placed an envelope on the dining table. Final payment. There it was. 8 weeks reduced to a check and 2 signatures. I picked up the envelope. So I'm officially unemployed again. You're officially finished with this project. The distinction landed strangely. I waited. Daniel said nothing else. Of course he didn't. I had asked for space. He was giving it to me even when some irrational part of me wanted him to ignore everything I'd said and make the decision easier. Well, I closed my laptop. Thanks for hiring me. You earned it. Even after the workplace safety incident. Despite it. I laughed. Daniel didn't. His eyes stayed on me with an expression I couldn't read without risking hope. I packed my pencils, charger, measuring tape, the stupid coffee mug I had started leaving beside the sink around week 3. Daniel washed without stopping me. That hurt more than it should have. Maybe Jake had been right. Maybe Summer had created a version of us that only existed inside this house. Maybe the project ending was supposed to feel like waking up. I carried my bag outside. The late August air had changed. Still warm, but softer. Summer already preparing to leave. My car waited beneath the trees. I opened the trunk. Evan. I stopped. Daniel stood on the porch. No rolled sleeves today. No work plans in his hands. Just Daniel. Yeah. He came down one step. You asked for space because you needed to know whether this was real outside the project. My heartbeat kicked. I did. Have you figured it out? I swallowed. Have you? Daniel looked toward the house, then back at me. For 5 days, I didn't have lunch with you. Devastating. My coffee tasted wrong. That sounds like a brewing problem. I kept turning around to tell you things. My jokes disappeared. Daniel stepped off the porch. And every time I remembered you weren't there, the house felt. He paused. Finished. I frowned. Isn't that good? Not the way I mean it. Silence stretched between us. I hired you because you were the best person for the project, he said. I kept wanting you here for reasons that had nothing to do with the project. My chest tightened. Daniel, you asked whether this was just Summer. He stopped several feet away, leaving the distance for me to close if I wanted. Of course he did. Stay long enough to find out. No pressure. No promise of forever. Just an invitation. I looked at the envelope in my hand. Final payment. The line between employer and employee was gone. The project was over. And somehow, standing there with nothing professionally requiring me to remain, leaving had never felt less necessary. You know, I said, walking toward him. You could have said that before I packed the car. Relief softened his face. You needed space. I've changed my mind. That quickly. I stopped one step below him. 8 weeks isn't quickly. His eyes dropped to my mouth. This time, neither of us had a rule left to hide behind. Behind Daniel, sunlight filled the blue room upstairs. No longer locked. No longer waiting. And for the first time all summer, neither were we. 2 weeks after the project ended, I returned to the lake house carrying Thai food instead of a toolbox, which felt like meaningful professional development. Daniel opened the door before I knocked. You're early. You're disappointed? I've been waiting 20 minutes. My heart did something embarrassing. That sounds dangerously honest. I'm trying something new. At 46? Go home, Evan. You'd miss me. Daniel took the food from my hands. Unfortunately, dating Daniel Hayes turned out to be surprisingly similar to working for him, except I was no longer paid to argue with him, and kissing had become an available conflict resolution strategy. We were taking it slowly. Actual dates. Dinner in town. Coffee that wasn't disguised as a workplace necessity. One evening at my apartment, where Daniel spent 20 minutes criticizing a bookshelf I had assembled myself. It leans. It has personality. It's structurally unsound. So is this relationship. He kissed me anyway. Jake knew. That part had been less romantic. 3 days after the project ended, he invited both of us to lunch and spent the first 10 minutes looking like a man attending a hostage negotiation. Finally, he put down his burger. I have one rule. I looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. This should be healthy, I said. Jake ignored me. Don't make me regret trusting both of you. Daniel answered first. Fair. I nodded. Fair. Jake pointed at me. And I never want to hear about my dad's arms again. That was one voice memo. One too many. Daniel looked suspiciously amused. Traitor. Jake still wasn't completely comfortable. I didn't expect him to be. But he didn't treat us like a disaster either. That mattered. So did the fact that Daniel never rushed me into becoming something permanent just because we had spent 8 weeks almost becoming something. We were learning each other outside the lake house. That was the point. And somehow, without a project between us, Daniel still called. Still remembered my coffee. Still sent me photographs of terrible renovation decisions he saw around town with captions like criminal. I still wanted to tell him things first. Apparently, Jake's question had an answer. It wasn't just summer. That Friday, after dinner, I wandered upstairs while Daniel cleaned the kitchen. The blue room door was open. It stayed open now. I stepped inside. Evening light spread across the oak desk. Jake's height marks remained on the frame. The old baseball glove sat beside new architecture books Daniel had bought. On the desk was a sketchbook. Mine. I had forgotten it on the final day. Except I hadn't left it open to a blank page with a new pencil beside it. Daniel appeared behind me. You moved my sketchbook. I gave it a desk. That's dangerously close to giving me drawer space. Don't panic. I turned. I'm 24. Commitment terrifies my generation. Your generation documents breakfast. Because nobody believed us before photography. Daniel smiled and stepped inside. I looked around. You use this room? Most mornings. Any ghosts? Only your design choices. Cruel. His fingers brushed mine. No rule made either of us pull away now. I threaded our hands together. Daniel looked at them, then at me. There was still something almost cautious in his expression. Like happiness was a renovated floor he hadn't fully trusted with his weight yet. What? I asked. Nothing. You're staring. I'm allowed. New policy. Project ended. I smiled. Daniel lifted our joined hands and pressed his mouth briefly against my knuckles. My entire nervous system, which had survived 8 weeks of him rolling up his sleeves, finally surrendered. So, he said, looking around the room, what do you think it needs now? I considered the question seriously. The old stars were still on the ceiling. Jake's childhood remained on the doorframe. Daniel's books occupied the shelves. My sketchbook waited on the desk. Nothing erased. Nothing trapped. Nothing. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Nothing. I looked at him. It's not waiting anymore. His expression softened. Then he kissed me. Slow. Warm. No storm outside. No loose dockboard. No employment contract. No countdown hanging over us. Just Daniel's hand against my jaw and summer light fading beyond the lake. When we separated, he rested his forehead against mine. You know, I whispered, Jake is going to hate that we kissed in his childhood bedroom. Then don't tell him. I laughed. That's how this whole thing started. Daniel smiled. Worked out reasonably well. Outside, the lake turned gold beneath the last light of August. 8 weeks earlier, my best friend's dad had hired me for a summer project. I thought I was there to restore an old house. Maybe Daniel thought so too. But restoration, I learned, was never about making something look untouched. It was about deciding what deserved to remain, what needed to change, and whether there was enough courage to build around both. Daniel kissed me again. Downstairs, dinner waited. The blue door stayed open behind us. The project was finished. We weren't.